I hope everyone can hear me. If they can, just give me a thumbs up, just so that I know that you can hear me. Fantastic, thank you. Okay, guys, so it's been a while since our last conference. I hope everybody's well over there. Obviously, the situation is ever evolving with the whole COVID crisis. As we said in our beginning conferences, and we still say, look, things are they're very much meant to be different as per country. Situations are evolving everywhere. So when we first did our first conference, I believe the Europe was just starting, India hadn't really started, and China and Singapore were a little bit just into their process. That was when we were first sort of started speaking about this. Now the situation is very different. It's more for it's now more on the Asian side that we're going to recover or work. I'm fine, thank you very much, Ashraful. The situation has evolved. So what I want to do is I want to talk about what the situation with Europe is, what the admissions news is, what the latest is from the universities, and then we can go into, if you do want to apply this September, what to do for accommodation, etc. So good to see you guys too. I hope everybody's safe and well. And I'm going to talk to you about our numbers, if you know what our numbers are. If you don't, you'll get to know. Anybody, we'll have a bit more of an interactive session. I'll try and make it brief. I do want to keep it less because, as I say, hundreds of people watch this video afterwards, and I don't want to be babbling on for too long such that they get bored. If anybody does want to join the closed webinar afterwards, later this week or next week, actually later next week, then you can just sign up or send a message on Facebook Messenger, and we will add you in onto that. And that's obviously much more interactive. So any personal questions or questions that you have to do with your own course or the university that you're thinking of applying to, I would be more than happy to help you there as well. So in the meanwhile, I'll get started. So I wanted to share my screen with you guys and just talk a little bit about our numbers. Bear with me 1 second. Yeah, I'll do this. Bear with me. This is the first time I've done this. So, okay. Right. So as you can see, so this is just this is the details of our seminar, or what this is webinar, I mean, what this is on today. Updates on coronavirus, UK and Europe admissions for this coming September and January 21. So this is what I actually wanted to give you guys a bit of a briefing on, which is what the new COVID cases are in the UK and Europe. So as we can probably see from here, the peak in the UK was about the end of March to the first couple of weeks of April was the peak. And the cases just peaked above 8,000 new cases a day. As the lockdown was entered into on the last week of March, you can see how that, because obviously everything is a 2-week delay. Everything all the data we get is essentially data that's happened 2 weeks ago, because the infections that are tested and are input into the data were infections that were had 2 weeks ago. So if we can see the lockdown we entered in at the end of March in the UK, and we can see the peak from the 2 weeks before that was happening, and then since then there's been a steady decline to what is now less than 800 cases a day, or thereabouts. In Germany, you can see it's even less. So they peaked at around about time, which was beginning of April. They peaked at about 6,000 as opposed to 8,000. and has gone down even stronger than the UK, but they're both at very, very low cases. So, there's only a few hundred cases in Germany a day. By comparison, I just wanted to give the situation with COVID in India. Obviously, a much bigger population, much harder to control population, as well as much harder to survive environment. So, all in all, it's a much more it's a very different situation. It's as we would say, a different ball game altogether. Over there, we can see that. I mean, the cases when Europe was peaking at the beginning of April, there was hardly any cases in India, and then since then there has been a strong. This is pretty much an exponential increase in the daily cases, and we are now at above 20,000, nearly 21,000. If anybody's messaging, I can't really see for the time being what I'm doing. Yeah, I can now. Right, so that's essentially where we are as far as COVID is concerned at the moment. I want to go in on the R rates as well, so give me a second. Wherever it was just before. Yeah, so, and the R rate. I don't know whether there's much talk of the R rate in India or not, but the R rate is basically the rate of infection, which is how many people does one person infect. So if the rate is above 1, that means we're going to be seeing what's happening on the right. One person will infect more than one person. That will in turn go in and infect more than one other person. And so the virus will spread very quickly and it will increase in the population. Wherever the rate of infection is below 1, i.e. one person is infecting less than one other person, the rate of infection slows down and we see a decline, as we have done, as we can see in these graphs. The other part of the thing which people are scared about or people think about as far as COVID is concerned is how many people die from it. It's also quite important over here to realize that out of the 11 million cases worldwide, about 6 million have recovered. So that's more than half. And the deaths are, in comparison, less than 10% of those who have recovered. So bear in mind that unless you have an existing health condition, you are not going to be in the age bracket that is most at risk. So you're not considered an at-risk category. So that's important. I'm going to stop sharing that now and go back. So, okay. Now, moving on, I hope that gives a bit of a brief as to where we are in what the situation is in Europe and what the situation, how it's evolving in India in comparison. I don't want to talk about the United States because this webinar is not about that. And again, the US has, depending on your political inclinations, not the best governance at the moment. And on top of that, out of the developed countries in the world, their rate of control on the infection is quite bad. So let's talk about Europe because the majority of our focus is in Europe. We have our offices in London and in Germany, etc. So let's focus on that for this week. Any questions you do have about Canada or about the US or Australia, etc., please feel free to ask. Or if you want to join the closed group, I can answer more questions about those countries specifically then. I'm going to go through accommodation as well today and the updates from the universities. So as far as the UK is concerned, and Germany and Ireland, admissions are as normal. There is no changes. Universities are expecting to be teaching in physical classes. No university has as yet said that they want to be doing virtual classes, which is quite important. So as long as you know that you are, or as long as you're brave enough, and I think at the moment it's not even about being brave. It's actually safer to be in Europe. There is no quarantine rules at the moment for many countries, but even if there is a quarantine, it will be a quarantine of about 1 to 2 weeks, in which you're staying in a hotel. So you'll be attending your classes from from a hotel or from quarantine. But that is if there is one, and that's the very worst case situation. If I had the option as a student to sit in a hotel and attend my classes virtually, even if it was only for a week, I would love it. So it's all perspectives. But now oh yeah, so this is an important update. The UK today, that is the 4th of July. Today in the UK, a nationwide end to lockdown has been announced, right? That doesn't mean that there is not social distancing norms in place. There is social distancing in place. However, it is going to be much more limited. So restaurants are opening, pubs are opening, retail shops were already open before, like clothing stores, etc. But now there is going to, now from today, the pubs are open. So the great British public is expected to be found to quite an extent in the pubs today. Now that is obviously a big thing for this economy, because a lot of people, it's a very traditional thing to go to the pub over here and spend time out in restaurants and go out for dining, etc. So that all opens today. The only regulations that are in place are 1 meter distancing rules. So tables must be wiped down completely. Of course, if with antibacterials, every company and every place of eating or retail or that way otherwise has sanitizing and social distancing in place. You actually have to follow these taped lines on the inside the stores so that you can follow the lanes and go in one direction, and the lanes are made with about 2 meters distance and apart. But if you're sitting in a restaurant, then the seating must be 1 meter, at least 1 meter apart. So restaurants that would otherwise have had a capacity of, let's say, 50 people may only be able to seat about 20 people now. But either way, it's in the interest of making sure that that R rate that we were talking about earlier stays down, stays below 1, so that we don't have a second wave. So far, so good. I would say that as a country, the recovery has been strong with coronavirus. There was a release of the lockdown in phases, and now from today, it's almost completely back to normal. Now we will see within 2 weeks whether what the impact of this decision is. But just like with everything else, it's a 2-week incubation period. So we become aware of how things are panning out in about 2 weeks from the present day. So let's say if we say present day as it is, we are coming out of lockdown, then we will see what the effect of this is in about 2 weeks. But either way, it's really a very positive story. And of course, it's the same in the majority of countries in Europe. So that includes Ireland and Germany, because if anything, the UK is, if anything, slightly more, slightly further behind in the recovery than other European countries. And that's because, of course, London is very highly populated, densely populated as compared to other cities in Europe. So if we take Berlin or if we take other main cities in Europe, they're not as populated as London. So that was always to be expected. But again, we are seeing a very, very strong recovery. As far as universities are concerned, I want to move on to universities. Universities are carrying on as normal. As I said before, admissions in September are happening. The start might be 1 or 2 weeks later than expected, so that students or any other students can join at the same time. So whereas we would normally start a semester at the end of September, they may start in October now. And if it does start in October, or certain universities start in October, it will be in the first couple of weeks of October. So that's all very good news. And it's not going to be online classes, it's going to be physical classes. Now, remember, the biggest and one of the most important things is the post-study work. Post-study work permits remain the same. 2 years for the UK, 2 years for Ireland, 1.5 years for Germany. So you will still get to benefit from the post-study work permit. There is no travel restrictions at the moment as far as entry into the UK is concerned. Depending on what country you come from, there may be a quarantine. It's not released yet. From Europe, there is none at the moment, or most of the countries in Europe, there is not any quarantine. So when you come back, but given the situation in India and the high rate of cases in India, there may be a quarantine. But again, I wouldn't worry about it, because your quarantine will be government sponsored. It will be a very nice hotel, and you'll have a very fast internet connection, and you'll be basically getting fed in your room for what is maybe 1 week or 10 days. In the grand scheme of things, if your life's vision is to be intellectually educated in one of the top countries in Europe, to leave and have with you under your belt for the rest of your life a first-class education, worldwide first-class education, then staying 1 week or 10 days or 2 weeks in a hotel and joining your classes from there, or coming to England even a week or two early. You don't even have to join. You can join your classes physically, but you may have to come to the UK a week or so earlier. Then that should not be a consideration. If that is a consideration for you, that you're worried about spending maybe a week or two in a quarantine, then I would really say you need to reevaluate your priorities, because it is a ridiculous notion to not want to stay in a hotel room for a week or two, so that you can actually be safer, and at the same time benefit from your education. These are rules that are there to provide everybody protection, countries protection from viruses or other things coming in and going out, and so it's a standard procedure. As I'm sure like there is in India at the moment, if somebody in your colony gets infected with coronavirus, they seal that door, or they make everybody in the neighborhood aware that that person has coronavirus. That is for your protection, not to victimize them, but it's for everybody else's protection, so people know that there is something there, and to be careful. And that is exactly what this is. So if anybody is worried about that, we can of course answer more questions about it and tell you what it's like, and so on and so forth. But it really is nothing to be worried about, at least in terms of the opportunity cost of what you're getting to benefit. And what you will get to benefit from is that education and the post-study work permit, and essentially what will be your future career, or the opportunities available to you in your future. So that is that is the updates from the university. Universities are carrying on as normal. If anything, scholarships, as I've said before, scholarships and other such opportunities are more available at this time, because there is people more scared. Remember, as I've said to you before, a famous saying by Warren Buffett, and if you do guys know who Warren Buffett is, then fantastic. If you don't, he's one of the richest men in the world, and the best institutional investor in the world. He's the best investor, known to be the best investor in the world. He says, when all others fear, move forward and take those risks, and when other people are brave, then be fearful. So all I would say is, at this time, be brave, benefit from the scholarships that are available, and from the lack of admissions and lack of competition that is there in the market. So remember, there's less people applying for the same amount of seats as there would be in a normal year. So if you do, and remember, if you apply to the universities now and you get an offer, you don't have to avail that offer. You can extend it. You can defer your entry. At least you have the offer in hand. Remember, it's not costing you anything. You're not having to pay a deposit. Your application fees will be dealt with by us to quite an extent. At this moment, we can get IELTS waivers, so you don't even have to have an IELTS exam. And we can get application fee waivers as well. So it literally means you are paying nothing, and in some cases, you're not even doing your IELTS. Even though we do recommend that you do your IELTS or PTE or TOEFL, all of them are accepted. But if you cannot do it and there's not enough time, then we will apply for the waiver for you. And in 8 times out of 10, we get those waivers. There is 20% of the time that we cannot, And for those particular students, because of their particular education or what medium they studied in, it's not possible whatsoever. But 80% of the time, even more than that, we can get it. So remember, it is not too late. If you think, oh, I haven't done this, I haven't done this, I haven't done this, or I don't want to pay anything, I just want to get the offer, all the options are available. So what I would say is fortune favors the brave. Unless you don't try, you won't know. So it's important to go ahead and try and apply and find out what options you have available to you, and then go through them. And then there's no harm in applying, getting your offer. And then even if your parents or anybody who is your carer or advisor or whatever says, no, look, we don't want you to go yet, we want you to go maybe in January 2021, then we can defer that entry for you. So at least you have your admission paper, your letter of your offer in your hand. And we can then defer that entry and you can accept your deferred entry. So you're not going to be paying a deposit and then losing that deposit or anything like that. So that's important. Now, as far as accommodation is concerned, remember there is social distancing rules in place. There are tracks that people follow. Everybody is very, very courteous here and very, very aware of social distancing norms. Public transport you're not allowed on, and stores you're not allowed in without a mask. There is certain amounts of people that are allowed in every store. So you can't just walk into a store. There's a guard at every door that's only allowing a certain amount of people in. So a certain amount of people have to leave the store before new people can come in. So that again is quite important to be aware of and to bear in mind, at least as far as your own safety is concerned, and maybe relay that to whoever your guardian is, who may have concerns about a second wave or other bits and pieces. So that's very important. Now, other than that, as far as accommodation is concerned, accommodation is available everywhere, and there is, sorry about that, I'm being interrupted left, right, and center. It's obviously working from home. Anyway, so it's really quite a bad time, isn't it? So anyway, while we're talking about that, if anybody has any questions, I'm going to open the floor to questions as well. So please do put in any questions that you do have, because I'll answer them as of this moment. But in the meantime, just to give you a bit of an idea, we can talk about sort of what cities in the UK are least affected. Even somebody may have heard of Leicester. So Leicester is quite affected at the moment. And so there is a second lockdown in Leicester, and that is being modulated by a localized lockdown. So again, even though lockdown is being we are coming out of lockdown, at the same time we are very much maintaining things on a localized basis. So there's tracking and tracing as well. If anybody feels they have any symptoms in the UK, you can book, anybody now can book a localized test. So you just go in your car and they swab your mouth, and within 1 day they tell you whether you have coronavirus, you have never had it, or if you've had it and recovered. If you have it, they'll do contact tracing and they'll tell you to isolate for a certain amount of time. So self-isolate for a week. And then after that, you come out of self-isolation. So it's a gradual thing, but as we saw from the graph that I showed earlier, and for those people who have only just joined us, when this session ends, you can watch this, and right at the beginning, I've got some graphs and you can see sort of a comparison between the UK and Germany, and then the UK and Germany and India and other bits and pieces. And what the R rate is, because I think a lot of people don't know what the R rate is, and the R rate is very key in managing the increase or control in coronavirus in any particular country. So I hope that gives you a bit of an update. I'm going to keep the session brief. We don't have too many questions. I'm going to keep it brief this time. Next week, hopefully we will have another dual webinar with with our guest from either Germany or Singapore, and we will do a bit of an intro, and so it will be live from either London and Singapore or London and Germany, and we'll get a bit of a brief and see what's happening with Singapore, and also what's going on in Germany, even though I have covered a lot of Germany, and I do cover Germany when I'm speaking. So anyway, that is that. Unless we do have any more questions, I'm going to just cover a couple of bits about accommodation. If we don't have any questions, I'm just going to talk about accommodation, and then that will be the end for this week. There is, if anybody has any university specific questions, they can ask, but we don't have, everything is as normal. So there is no university except for Cambridge that is thinking of having a much later start this year. So i.e. maybe deferring the September entry to a January entry. But other than Cambridge, all universities are as normal, starting at the end of September or beginning of October. And nobody has said that there's going to be online classes only. It is all going to be in place, but there will be social distancing in place, which means that you won't be able to sit on the desk next to somebody. There will probably be your desk and then two desks in between, or one desk in between, depending on the size of the desk. And that's it. So there'll be markers on seats, and you'll have to sit in your designated seats. So that's a very positive thing. So somebody's asked, when are universities planning to start courses? The September intake is carrying on as normal, as I've mentioned, and the January intake will, of course, start in January. If there is any increase in time from the start, it will be a couple of weeks to let anybody and students who have to come from countries that need to be quarantined, that will be quarantined for 2 weeks. Okay, can you provide the preferred structure of an SOP? So we do SOP editing. We have the best panel of SOP editors in the whole of India, by a long shot. So if anybody even tries to compare to Admissify's SOP editors, they cannot. They don't even do editing, and that's talking about the big names in India. I don't want to mention anybody's name, but they don't do it. We do. That's why we have so many scholarship winners. If you go to our Facebook page, you'll just see some of the people recently for this September intake that we've got very big scholarships for. So there's a lot of people getting in that are carrying on as normal, that are flying under the radar with big scholarships, and people are frozen in fear. So it's a choice. You either aim high and you get, at the moment, bigger scholarships. A lot more people, the amount of people that are getting scholarships is much higher than people who are then otherwise would have been. So the SOPs are, and as I've said, the SOPs are very, very important to being able to get a scholarship or getting an admission into your top choice universities. So the structure of an SOP. Remember, I haven't got that slide with me right now. In fact, let me just see. I do have that. I may well do. I think I do have that. So let me just pull that up for you. Yeah. Okay. Let's share this screen so you guys can see. Okay. So as you can see here, the importance of the quality application. Right, so this is your SOP. So your SOP should be around about 500 words, right? Now it should really talk about a big mistake that a lot of people do is they just talk about themselves, like, oh, I achieved so and so and so, I did this, I did that, etc. I got X amount of marks here, I did the Model UN when I was at school. Afterwards, I worked in my dad's company, or I worked in Dell for 2 years. It's okay, but it's very important how these things interlink. So if you look at the light orange things we have here, we can see you want to talk about your academic achievements, fine. You also want to talk about your extracurricular and sporting achievements, good. What you want to do also is show that you have another side to yourself. So any social or charitable activities you've been a part of, you want to really discuss that, talk about that. And of course, any work and business experience that you've done. But if you look at the what we have below, you want to tie all of that information in with what your learning and course vision is. So what is it? Why do you want to go to that particular university? And remember, when we're applying for a scholarship, you're applying for a scholarship at a particular university. Your SOP needs to be different for each one of your applications. So if you're applying to 6 universities, ideally you want to have 6 different SOPs which are fine-tuned. The vast majority of it can be the same, but you want to have it fine-tuned for each one of the 6, just a little bit of an edit. So why Manchester, for example, if Manchester is a university? Why UCL, or why King's, or why Queen Mary's, or why, whatever the university is, Nottingham? Why that particular course? Why that particular city? How have your academic achievements helped you understand what your course and what your vision is for the future, what you want to learn going forward? How has your work experience and business impacted what your career ambitions are after your graduation? How has any of your extracurricular or sporting achievements or charitable or social achievements helped you become who you are that will help you achieve that vision or that ambition? So do you see what I mean? Everything that you have done should tie into everything that you want to do and your vision of the future, and how what you have done has shaped you to be able to achieve what you want to achieve in the future. Does that make sense? I hope it does. At this moment, I have my screen in front of me, so I can't see it, but I will. Let me go back. There we are. Yeah, so I hope you can see that in some details. Let me just read some more questions. Can there be more than one letter of reference or recommendation? Of course there can. Yeah. You can, as long as they're relevant. What you don't want to do is have, I don't know, some neighbor. This is a silly example, but just in case, what you don't want to do is have a neighbor say, "Oh, Udian is an amazing guy." It doesn't have value. It should come from, if you've talked about your charitable and social events, or you've worked for a charity. Admissify is tied up with very many charities and NGOs in India, where we send our students, even if it's just for a short period of time, but then we get those organizations to give you an LOR, which is in a letter of recommendation, which is in a format which we have written, and they sign it off for you, which is really, really good, because you want to have an LOR. I mean, some of you will have letters of recommendation from your college or school professors, or your college professors, saying how fantastic a student you were. But it's also important to have, maybe if you're applying for a master's and you have some relevant work experience, then maybe something from your place of employment to say that you were very dedicated and you did more than within your scope of work to do. Or, like I say, a charity where an NGO owner or foundation operations manager or whatever will say something like, it was really dedicated, helped a lot of people. If it's a blind charity or an orphanage, the students loved him. He had a really good energy, or she had a really good energy. Or if you've excelled in sports, then whatever, your sporting tutor, as long as that makes sense. So 1 second, somebody else has asked, so what are the general scholarships which we can get as international students? Can we give the details? Do we need to apply for scholarships separately? Okay, it's a brilliant question, and quite a complex one, so I'll answer it. In fact, that's a good point. Next week we will do a webinar dedicated directly just on scholarships. Okay, so Lit Flower, that's your name apparently. So that again, thank you for that question. What we will do is cover this in full detail next week, but let me brief you very quickly now. So scholarships come in very many different forms. So you've got titled scholarships, you've got merit-based scholarships. So let's take the word scholarship first. So there's merit-based scholarships. Merit-based scholarships are to do with your academic and or otherwise your other achievements, right? But there are other scholarships that are available that a lot of people don't do in India because people don't know about them. But of course, they're available. Things like bursaries and other bits and pieces. But I'm going to talk about that, and I particularly want to talk about that in its own webinar. But there are other ways of getting what is essentially money off, but without necessarily having to have 99% and a really well written SOP. So we will discuss those methods, and we from our London office liaise with the universities directly in order to get you those scholarships, which is why we have the highest rate of scholarships per admission that we do, as opposed to any other consultant. Anyway, so scholarships, certain scholarships, university will have certain scholarships. Those are called title scholarships. So the I don't know, Edward Alleyne scholarship or the Ratan Tata scholarship, those scholarships have to be applied for in advance, and they are title scholarships. They are scholarships that are paid for by a particular foundation. There are other scholarships that university will have, so they can give a certain amount of scholarships. If you apply on time, you apply with a very good SOP, and you accept your offer and your scholarship early, and your consultant is maybe UK based or somebody like us that is of a very high quality, on a high quality end of the thing, rather than somebody who's just going to apply, send your application in without working on your SOP, without working on you and your circumstances directly, then of course that will get pushed by the lay side. But if we are following that up with very good written SOPs and following up the university to chase up on your behalf, your scholarship, then quite often you will get awarded that scholarship. If you get awarded, you just have to pay your deposit, and that is locked in for you. Now, there are other things like the bursaries that I say that we can request on your behalf from the universities, but that is very much more what we need to do from the London side of things, as opposed to on the application side. But the work that we need to do for the scholarships is on your application side, the part that is involved with you. The rest of it is what we will deal with, like bursaries or other parts, bits and pieces. We will go for and petition on your behalf, but that does not change the fact that the application needs to be of a very, very good standard, and that includes having a good LOR, a good SOP, and a cover letter if that's necessary. And we apply at the same time. So we don't apply separately, we apply at the same time for everything, because your application needs to be top notch in order for your, I must say again, for people who are thinking that it's very easy to do a very well written SOP, I have looked at hundreds of SOPs from our hundreds of students that have gone to the UK for top universities. UK and Germany is the ones that I normally look at. Particularly law, because of course I'm an LLM, I'm a master of law, so particularly with law, and I'm also an engineer, so I look at some of the engineering ones as well. But a lot of people say, with a lot of confidence, even really, really top, toppers, as you say in India, the top students, they think their SOPs are fantastic. And when I'm done with it, most of it is yellow in terms of the amount of edits, and things that are required. So bear in mind, it is never as easy as you think it's going to be. But at the same time, it is something that is very achievable in terms of the amount of in terms of the work that we can do to really make you a grade apart, the next level of student or whatever. Right. So let me move on. Until the situation will be back to normal, how strongly can we suggest the people to take up the semester in abroad? What about the safety concern of the students in this global health crisis? Won't it will affecting the plans to look for food in their table? Okay. Sorry, your grammar is a bit off. Let me try and understand what you mean. Until the situation will be back to normal, how can we strongly suggest students take up a semester abroad? What about the safety concerns of the student and global health crisis when it be affected? Okay, well, obviously, Pawandeep, you weren't at the beginning of our seminar. We did a comparison of what the coronavirus situation is in the UK and in Germany and in Europe as compared to what the situation is in India. So if you're suggesting to a pupil would you like to, or to your child, or any student is thinking, oh, I'm safer at home, there's more than 21 or about 21,000 new cases in India a day versus less than 800 a day here, right? And this graph is showing a steady decline, whereas India is showing a steady, an exponential increase. So if anything, it's safer to be abroad, particularly where the populace is, or in Europe, particularly where the population is very well educated, is maintaining social norms, social distancing norms. Social distancing is in place for every business, from food to takeaway. You know, most restaurants, I mean, until today, you can't be two people, you can't even collect the food at one time. So it is very safe where everybody else is safe around you, right? However, where people are less educated or less aware of what norms and social distancing things need to be in place, it's going to obviously be more at risk. Unless you are willing to put your life on hold for the indefinite future, I would say it's about being brave. At the same time, you know, if a student has acute asthma or something like that, I would suggest that they're not at risk anyway, because they're they're a younger age. So anyway, I hope that answers that question. I don't have won't it affect their plans to look for the food in their table? I guess that means you're considering getting a job afterwards. Remember, a master's is 1 year in the UK. We're going to be way out of this crisis by 1 year, and then you have 2 years post-study work permit. So, yep. Considering that today all the pubs and shops and everything is open completely, albeit with social distancing in place, even though as long as it is there, it is important to see, important to realize that part-time jobs are going to be back on as well. So if anybody's looking to do a part-time job while they're studying, you know, like at a cafe or at a pub or anywhere, a restaurant, then those are all opening up. So part-time jobs will be available as well. Sir, can you please tell about the reputation of the University of Birmingham in the UK, as I'm looking forward to take admissions for it for MSc in Electrical Power Systems? Okay, so Tim, the University of Birmingham is a very good university. It's an amazing city. It's a very nice city, in fact. It's got a very, very strong Asian Indian demographic as well. So it's very multicultural, one of the most multicultural cities outside of London in the UK. I would say the most multicultural cities in the UK are London, number one, then Birmingham and Manchester, number 2 and number 3. So it's fantastic. I would say a very nice mix of people. It's a very good university. There's lots to do and lots to see, and really fantastic places to eat and go around in Birmingham. It's a good university in and of itself. As far as your MSc in Electrical Power Systems is concerned, we can talk about your course specifically. Please send a message on the app, on the Admissify app, or on the Facebook Messenger, say that you want to join, and we'll send you an invite for that closed webinar, and we can discuss your case in London. How can one consult Admissify at Delhi? You can book an appointment to come into the office, or we can do a Zoom conference with you from London, or from Admissify Delhi, or Admissify Guwahati, or Admissify Chandigarh, or one of our other offices, where your specialist will be, your UK specialist will be allocated to you, and then we can have a webinar to then discuss with you. But in the meantime, I would download the Admissify app, and any questions you have, you can ask on the app itself. And of course, do your research from the app. It's a very good platform, 3,500 universities abroad, and lots of information about the universities, including student reviews. So, you know, it's free to download it. You have a browse through, book your free one-on-one session with one of our UK specialists, if that's the university, if you're looking to go to the UK, and or other country specialist if you're looking to go elsewhere. So Darshan says, hello. Thank you very much. I am fine and well. The beard looks good. Thank you very much. That's very kind of you. I will look to speak to you later on, but thank you for the compliment. I hope you're well as well. What is a cover letter, Udian? A cover letter is just something that complements your SOP. So it can just be a little bit about, you know, a particular thing at that course. So it's something that we kind of call a cover letter, but it's an extension of your SOP, or a preface, in fact, a forward to your SOP in a way. Sometimes it helps if we're going for the top universities. So let's say it's UCL or King's or Queen Mary's, or the Russell Group universities, the absolute top of the top universities. Sometimes what we do want to have is a little bit of an extension on top of an SOP. You want to really have an SOP as 500 words. You don't want to bore your admissions teacher or for them to read half of it and then go, oh, I've seen people send me 3 pages of an SOP. I would never read that if I was an admissions tutor. I would never read it. So there's no point. 500 words, clear, concise, who you are, what your vision is, what you've done, all beautifully tied in, brilliant grammar, very well written, and and you're going to be way on your way to a scholarship. And a cover letter is just saying something like, like let's say you don't have an IELTS, you haven't done your IELTS and you wanted to do a waiver, or let's say one of your years, one of your subjects, you had lower marks in. It's just a little something that says, maybe you were ill at that time, maybe you were looking after a poorly parent at that time, maybe we have some circumstances that we want the university to be aware of, but we don't want it to overshadow our SOP. Then we will cover that in the cover letter. And then your SOP is clean and great. So now, Sudarshan says writing an SOP is like a paradoxical myth. So Sudarshan is a good writer himself, so a lot of you will not have understood that pun, but it is a very it is a difficult thing. It is a challenge. It is very important. So remember, as good as you think you are, I have seen people who have a very good command of English who are applying to do an LLM. It is something that can always do with improvement, right? So Lit says, do we have 2-year post-study stay back if we do a PG diploma? Pretty much yes. If you're talking about the UK, you will have the 2-year stay back. It is for all graduates, postgraduate, undergraduate, and diploma as well, as long as the diploma is 1 year, which it will be in the UK. But again, what I would suggest is, why do a PG diploma when you can do a master's in the UK for the same amount of time? If you're asking about PG diploma for another country, then that's different. Right. So anyway, our details are there. Avinash has kindly put the details over here. That's the telephone number. You can download the app on the Play Store or on the Apple Store. It's available on both. And I'm going to close this session now. What I would say is, if you want to join a closed webinar and you have a lot more personal related questions about your particular course, or you want to decide between one university or the other university and you're not sure which one you should decide on, or something very specific to you or a country, we're going to have country specific webinars again. So starting from the end of the week, we'll either be doing them on Thursday or on Friday in the evening, so that if you have some daytime activities you need to do in India, you can do them. And then we will be doing it somewhere around about 6 or 7 o'clock India time. It would be very good of you to join, but we will not invite you or send you an invite to that closed webinar. Okay, it's not Facebook Live, it's a closed webinar. We will not be able to invite you unless you register your interest. The only way you can register your interest is by sending us a message on Facebook Messenger at the Admissify Facebook group. So go on the Facebook group and send a message, and we will register you for that. Or download the app and send us a message directly on the app, which is equally as good because you can do some browsing and research through the app itself. Remember, there's 3,500 universities and 11 countries on the app. Lots of information. So or if nothing else, it's some information. Download it; it's free. And of course, failing that, if you want to have a verbal conversation and you want to have it directly, call us. So remember, we're available on various media tools. Register your interest. We will send you a link. All you do is click on the Zoom link. I will be there. I will be there with a PPT. It will be in more depth than I have done today, and we'll be covering lots and lots of things: accommodation, living costs, etc., what particular universities are saying. We can see how many scholarships are open for that country. You can maybe even some of our people who have already got scholarships from last year we will invite to the webinar, so you can actually speak to some of our scholarship winners, how the SOP made a big difference, how our interview preparation with them made a big difference for their interview. So we do interview preparation as well. So we do questions with you, we go through them, we tell you what bits to improve, what bits you should say, what you shouldn't say. Because remember, you don't know what the process is. You might decide that it might be really good to say something, but it might be good to just adjust it slightly. So you're saying something a little bit different, a little bit parallel to what you wanted to say, but it sounds a lot better. Lots of little nuances, we say, that are very important, which are always good to know. So fantastic, guys. I hope you found this helpful. It's wonderful to be back and to be speaking with you. I hope you guys all stay well and stay brave, stay confident, and stay careful. Remember, we are coming out of this, at least on this part of the world, but you must be careful. You know, in India, it's more on the up part of the curve, so you do need to be very careful. I do wish you the very best in the meanwhile, and we'll be here next week. And if you do want to on Facebook Live, probably from 2 countries this time, not just the UK, we'll be from here in Singapore or here in Germany, and 2 people. I have a guest speaker as well with me next week. And if not, then join, and you want to ask more specific questions, join our closed webinar. Thank you very much, guys. Thank you very much for your questions. I hope I answered them fairly okay. More specific, you know what to do. So thank you very much, guys. Bye-bye.